Hi, everybody. My name is Ute Ritz-Deutch. Thank everybody for coming. And Wayles, I will give it to you.
All right. This is Amnesty International Group 73's celebration of Banned Books Week. And now we want to introduce Bethany Dixon. Bethany is a librarian at Cornell's Olin Library in the Interlibrary Loan Department, which I must say is one of my favorite departments because it's been able to get me books that I would otherwise never even have seen.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for letting me be here. It's great to hear from so many people. And I'm going to be reading from two different poets, starting with Mahmoud Darwish. And I'll see if I can show you folks this book. It's from the library, of course. It's called The Butterfly's Burden, and it's translated by Fadi Judah. And Mahmoud Darwish is a Palestinian poet whose family fled their native Galilee when he was only 6 years old in 1948. They fled to Lebanon and they returned after Israel had been created, too late to be recognized as Israeli Arabs. So he essentially became an exile in his own land. And these two poems are from his 1998 collection called The Stranger's Bed, which is his only collection of love poems. And he wrote it upon his return home after 26 years of exile. So the first poem is called Sonnet 1. If you are the last of what God told me, be the pronoun revealed to double the I. Blessedness is ours, now that almond trees have illuminated the footprints of passerby. Here on your banks, where above you grouse and doves flutter. With a gazelle's horn, you stabbed the sky. Then words flowed like dew in nature's veins. What's a poem's name before the duality of creation and truth? Between the faraway sky and your cedar bed, when blood longs for blood and marble aches. A myth will need to sunbathe around you. This crowdedness, these gods of Egypt and Sumer under palm trees, change their dresses and their days' names, and complete their journey to the end of rhyme. And my song needs to breathe. Poetry isn't poetry, and prose isn't prose. I dreamt that you are the last of what God told me. When I saw you both in my sleep, then there were words. The second poem, also by the same author, is called Two Stranger Birds in Our Feathers. My sky is ashen. Scratch my back and undo slowly, you stranger, my braids. And tell me what's on your mind. Tell me what crossed Yusuf's mind. Tell me some simple talk, the talk a woman always desires to be told. I don't want the phrase complete. Gesture is enough to scatter me in the rise of butterflies between spring heads and the sun. Tell me I am necessary for you like sleep, and not like nature filling up with water around you and me, and spread over me an endless blue wing. My sky is ashen, as a blackboard is ashen before writing on it. So write with my blood's ink anything that changes it, an utterance, too, without excessive aim at metaphor. And say we are two stranger birds in Egypt and in Syria. Say we are two stranger birds in our feathers, and write my name and yours beneath the phrase. What time is it now? What color are my face and yours in new mirrors? I own nothing for anything to resemble me. Did the water mistress love you more? Did she seduce you by the sea rock? Confess now that you have extended your wilderness 20 years to stay prisoner in her hands. And tell me, of what you think when the sky is ashen. My sky is ashen. I resemble what no longer resembles me. Do you want to return to your exile night in a mermaid's hair? Or do you want to return to your home figs? For no honey wounds a stranger here or there. What time is it now? What's the name of this place we're in? And what's the difference between my sky and your land? Tell me what Adam said in secret to himself. Was he emancipated when he remembered? Tell me anything that changes the sky's ashen color. Tell me some simple talk, the talk a woman desires to be told every now and then. Say that two people like you and me can carry all this resemblance between fog and mirage, then safely return. My sky is ashen. So what do you think of when the sky is ashen? And then I'll move over to Lorca, which is much shorter, don't panic. And so Federico Garcia Lorca was a Spanish poet. He was born in 1899. He died in 1936. He was only 37. And he was famous for his beautiful musical love poetry and infamous for his strong leftist politics and deeply homoerotic writing, which was banned until 1954 and censored until 1975. And he was executed by Franco's fascist regime in 1936. And this poem is called The Moon Sails Out. When the moon sails out, the church bells die away, and the paths overgrown with brush appear. When the moon sails out, the waters cover the earth, and the heart feels it is a little island in the infinite. No one eats oranges under the full moon. The right things are fruits, green and chilled. When the moon sails out with 100 faces all the same, the coins made of silver break out in sobs in my pocket. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that reading.
Yeah, my turn next, but what I have for you is Mak Dizdar from Bosnia, one of the greatest poets of the 20th century, poet, editor, scholar of medieval gravestones. But he was in trouble from time to time in his homeland. He published a poem in the 1930s, but Yugoslav censorship under the king cut it in half. He fought in World War II, and apparently because of that, fascists killed his mother and his sister. After World War II, in Yugoslavia, under the communist government, he became a well-known publisher and editor in Sarajevo, that's the capital of Bosnia. But when his publishing house published a novel by a young writer about peasant life, and it won first prize in the country, the authorities closed his publishing house. He went to edit a magazine, but he was worried when he started to write his own poetry. It is said that he was so worried about the authorities that he wrote his own manuscripts in old Arabic letters. And if anybody asked him, he could say it was a medieval gravestone epitaph there. Another legend, I'm not sure how true it is, well, it's definitely true that they gave him a bigger apartment to live in. But the legend is that his enemies got him evicted from it. And when he saw the eviction notice, he died of a heart attack. This poem is the title poem of a collection, Dark Blue River. A friend of mine named Keith Doubt is about to publish a translation of the whole collection, showing how every single poem in it has some connection with Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. But I think my translation here captures the play of sounds in his original better. So I'll put it into the chat and you can follow along. Nikto ne zna, gdje je ona. Malo znamo, ali je znano. Iza gore, iza dola, iza 7, iza 8. I još huđe, i još luđe, preko gorkih, preko mornih, preko gloga, preko drače, preko žege, preko stege, preko slutnje, preko sumnje, iza 9, iza 10. Tamo dolje, ispod zemlje i onamo ispod neba. I još dublje, i još jače, iza šutnje, iza tmače, gdje pjetlovi ne pjevaju, gdje se ne zna za glas roga. I još huđe, i još luđe, iza uma, iza Boga. Ima jedna modra rijeka, široka je, duboka je, 100 godina široka je, 1000 ljeta duboka jest. O duljini i ne sanjaj, tma i tmuša neprebolna. Ima jedna modra rijeka, ima jedna modra rijeka, valja nama preko rijeke. So that was Mat Dizdar, who was in trouble during his life, although most people would agree, who know about him, that he was one of the leading poets of the century.
And thank you, Wayles, for the reading. And I guess coming up next is Theresa Alt.
Okay. I will read from a speech by Eugene V. Debs. He was an American labor leader in the late 19th century and a Socialist Party candidate for president in the early 20th century. During World War I, which he opposed, he gave a speech on June 16th, 1918 in Canton, Ohio. I cannot read an hour-long speech, but I will read excerpts. Near the beginning, he said, "To speak for labor, to plead the cause of the men and women and children who toil, to serve the working class has always been to me a high privilege, a duty of love. I have just returned from a visit over yonder where 3 of our most loyal comrades are paying the penalty for their devotion to the cause of the working class. They have come to realize, as many of us have, that it is extremely dangerous to exercise the constitutional right of free speech in a country fighting to make democracy safe in the world. I realize that in speaking to you this afternoon, there are certain limitations placed upon the right of free speech. I must be exceedingly careful, prudent as to what I say, and even more think, but I am not going to say anything that I do not think. I would rather 1,000 times be a free soul in jail than to be a sycophant and coward in the streets. They may put those boys in jail and some of the rest of us in jail, but they cannot put the socialist movement in jail. Those prison bars separate their bodies from ours, but their souls are here this afternoon. They are simply paying the penalty that all men have paid in all ages of history for standing erect and for seeking to pave the way to better conditions for mankind. If it had not been for the men and women who, in the past, have had the moral courage to go to jail, we would still be in the jungles. There is but one thing you have to be concerned about, and that is that you keep foursquare with the principles of the international socialist movement. It is only when you begin to compromise that trouble begins. So far as I'm concerned, it does not matter what others may say or think or do, as long as I am sure that I am right with myself and the cause. There are so many who seek refuge in the popular side of a great question. He went on to talk about how capitalist newspapers lie. He told about Theodore Roosevelt being guest of honor of the German Kaiser just a few years before the war. He told of West Coast labor activist Tom Mooney being framed for a murder he didn't commit, and how the Supreme Court declared the child labor law unconstitutional. Then he got to World War I. He said, "Wars throughout history have been waged for conquest and plunder. In the Middle Ages, when the feudal lords who inhabited the castles whose towers may still be seen along the Rhine concluded to enlarge their domains, to increase their power, their prestige, and their wealth, they declared war upon one another. But they themselves did not go to war any more than the modern feudal lords, the barons of Wall Street, go to war." The feudal barons of the Middle Ages, the economic predecessors of the capitalists of our day, declared all wars, and their miserable serfs fought all the battles. The poor, ignorant serfs had been taught to revere their masters, to believe that when their masters declared war upon one another, it was their patriotic duty to fall upon one another and to cut one another's throats for the profit and glory of the lords and barons who held them in contempt. And that is war in a nutshell. And here, let me emphasize the fact, and it cannot be repeated too often, that the working class who fight all the battles, the working class who make the supreme sacrifices, the working class who freely shed their blood and furnish the corpses, have never yet had a voice in either declaring war or making peace. It is the ruling class that inevitably does both. They alone declare war and they alone make peace. Yours not to reason why, yours but to do and die. That is their motto, and we object on the part of the awakening workers of this nation. If war is right, let it be declared by the people. You who have your lives to lose, you certainly, above all others, have the right to decide the momentous issue of war or peace. He went on to talk about Rose Pastor Stokes being jailed for what she said about socialists seeking change non-violently, and about the need to act on your principles. He called out the hypocrisy of urging people to plant little victory gardens when large landlords were keeping half of the nation's arable land idle. And near the end, he said, "When we unite and act together on the industrial field, and when we vote together on election day, we shall develop the supreme power of the one class that can and will bring permanent peace to the world. We shall then have the intelligence, the courage, and the power for our task. In due time, industry will be organized on a cooperative basis. We shall conquer the public power. We shall then transfer the title deeds of the railroads, the telegraph lines, the mines, mills, and great industries to the people in their collective capacity. We shall take possession of all these social utilities in the name of the people. We shall then have industrial democracy. We shall be a free nation whose government is of and by and for the people." For this speech, Eugene Debs was convicted under the Sedition Act of 2018 and sentenced to 10 years. Late in 1921, which was just a few years later, President Harding commuted his sentence, but by then Debs' health was broken. He died in 1926 at age 70.
Thank you so much for that reading, Theresa. And I actually, the part about World War I, I just had my students read last week. So But so thank you for that. Wayles, I'm wondering if we should play Colleen's song now, or since we're running a little tight on time, should we just go straight to David Rendell next, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I'd say at least a minute or two of Colleen. Then.
All right, I will do that then.
Women won the vote in 1917 in a fight for restitution and equality. They put their bodies on the line, held hunger strikes and picket signs. Dangerous women, yes, but a bittersweet victory. It's dangerous to stand alone, dangerous to say your body is your own, dangerous to break from tyranny. Well-behaved women don't make history. How dangerous are you willing to be? Did you know for more than 1,000 years, Haudenosaunee women had it better here? They were equals, held the land, chose chiefs as mothers of the clan. These dangerous women gave the lie to Eve's sin. Seneca Falls, 1848, Western woman to put an end to her subjugated state. Coalitions changed, years passed by, enfranchised white women came the cry, but some brave voices rejected that injustice. It's dangerous to stand alone, dangerous to say your body is your own, dangerous to break from tyranny. Well-behaved women don't make history. How dangerous are you willing to be? Now there are women whose wisdom knows no age, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton or Matilda Jocelyn Gage, who knew their liberation could only be for each and all, who learned from native neighbors and they heeded their call to know and none are free when one of us is not. Stanton and Gage, remember their names, while others retreated, they remained steadfast, always to the claim that the vote alone is not enough to change, no matter what the danger. It's dangerous to break from tyranny. Well-behaved women don't make history. The vote was won, but who remains outside? Whose voice suppressed when class and race divide? Be like the mothers of the clan. Take back power to our hands. Know where we are and where we ought to be. Bend the arc to our authority. Be dangerous. Let's get dangerous. Be dangerous to make our history.
Colleen Kattau, local singer, songwriter, and we used to be colleagues at Ithaca College, but that goes back 20 years now. And we've been colleagues at SUNY Cortland for, I'd say, 16, 17 years now. But so that song endangers women from her latest CD, Kisses. And that takes us to David Rendell.
Hi, everybody.
And David is also an area coordinator with Amnesty International for New Jersey.
In New Jersey, right. That was very timely, the last piece, because as many of you probably know, there were numerous women's marches around the country today, especially in Washington, D.C. So that was timely. And another good segue from before that was talking about Eugene Debs, and the person I'm going to read from was from around that period, well, a little bit after, not so political, although he did make some political statements in his writings. He's more known for, shall we say, what was termed at the time his writings that were deemed as being pornographic. And of course, I do refer to D.H. Lawrence, and specifically Lady Chatterley's Lover. The reason I chose that is because I know it's hard to believe, but I'm actually old enough to remember, but there was a big trial in the UK as to whether or not the book could be legally imported into the UK. It was imported, it was smuggled in. People used to smuggle books because of its graphic depiction of sex acts. To me, it's an incredibly well-written book. It's not just about the sex content. There are many references within it to socialism. You could argue that they went after his work because socialist concepts didn't sit too well with people, but I just came up with that. I'm not actually, I can't substantiate that. So I'm just going to read a couple of short pieces. So I shall begin. But the colliers aren't pagan, far from it. They're a sad lot, a deadened lot of men, dead to their women, dead to life. The young ones scoot about on motorbikes with girls and jazz when they get a chance. But they're very dead. It needs money. Money poisons you when you get it and starves you when you haven't. I'm sure you're sick of all this, but I don't want to harp on myself, and I've nothing happening to me. I don't like to think too much about you. He is, of course, referring to this is the Lady Chatterley's Lover, and he's referring to Lady Chatterley. About you in my head, that only makes a mess of us both. But of course, what I live for now is you, and me to live together. I'm frightened, really. I feel the devil in the air, and he'll try to get us. Or not the devil, Mammon, which I think, after all, is only the mass will of people wanting money and hating life. Anyhow, I feel great grasping white hands in the air, wanting to get hold of the throat of anybody who tries to live beyond money and squeeze the life out. There's a bad time coming. There's a bad time coming, boys. There's a bad time coming. If things go on as they are, there's nothing lies in the future but death and destruction for these industrial masses. I feel my inside turn to water sometimes, and there you are, going to have a child by me. But never mind, all the bad times that have ever been haven't been able to blow the crocus out, not even the love of women. So they won't be able to blow out my wanting you, nor the little glow there is between you and me. We'll be together next year, and though I'm frightened, I believe in your being with me. A man has to fend and fettle for the best, and then trust in something beyond himself. You can't insure against the future, except by really believing in the best bit for you, and in the power beyond it. But I believe in the little flame between us. For now, it's the only thing in the world. I've got no friends, no inward friends, only you. And now the little flame is all I care about in my life. There's the baby, but that is a side issue. It's my Pentecost, the forkhead flame between you and me. The old Pentecost isn't quite right. Me and God is a bit uppish somehow. But the little forked flame between me and you, there you are. That's what I abide by and will abide by. Cliffords and Berthas, there are other characters in the story. Colliery companies and governments and the money mass of people notwithstanding. I shall now read the last 3 paragraphs, which are very short. Never mind about Sir Clifford, that's Lady Chatterley's husband. If you don't hear anything from him, never mind. He can't really do anything to you. Wait, he will want to get rid of you at last, to cast you out. And if he doesn't, we'll manage to keep clear of him. But he will. In the end, he will want to spew you out as the abominable thing. Now I can't even leave off writing to you. But a great deal of us is together, and we can but abide by it, and steer our courses to meet soon. John Thomas says good night to Lady Jane, a little droopingly, but with a hopeful heart. The end. And just before we go back to Uta, yeah, I do remember the trial, and I do remember my parents at the time. We're talking about 1959, 60. There was like people whispering about this book. Have you read it? Have you read it? Of course, at the age of 9 or 10, I knew it wasn't something that people should be doing, but because I didn't understand the content. So that's why I read that famous piece from that famous English book. Thank you.
And thank you so much for that, David. It's amazing what pieces of literature have been banned at one time or another. But so thank you for that. And coming up next is Jonathan Miller.
Oh, hello, everyone. I've been involved with Ithaca City of Asylum for the last few years, not too long. But I went into my basement. I'm the archive at this point. And I went into my basement and looked, we have piles of chapbooks that we have helped our guest writers, our writers in residence, to write and to publish when they finish their time with us. And in a fairly random way, I've been really moved by my meetings with Sonali Samarasinghe, who was our writer in residence 3 writers ago. And just very briefly, Ithaca City of Asylum provides 2 years of support usually for people who come to Ithaca because life is too dangerous or they're unable to work where they're based. And the first 4 people were literary writers, and then the last 3 have been journalists. And Sonali was a very accomplished lawyer, worked for the government in Sri Lanka. She became an investigative journalist, and she went to work for one of the most important opposition papers that was doing a lot of investigation during the civil war in Sri Lanka in the early 2000s. The civil war went from the 80s to 2009, and more than 140,000 people were killed. At any rate, she joined this newspaper. The editor of the newspaper was Lasantha Wickramatungi. I'm going to get all the names wrong, but they worked together in this heady time and fell in love and got married. And that was December of 2008. And in January of 2009, after 13 days of marriage, Lasantha was surrounded by gunman on his way to work and assassinated. And Sonali fled shortly after that. So here's a little chapbook called My Life in a Garden that was published in 2016. Sonali was here from 2012 to 2014. And then this book is mostly memoir fragments and little essays. And so I'm going to read one that's just a page and a third, and I hope I'm within my time limit. Lasantha's first gift to me was a Meisterstück Mont Blanc pen. One morning I'd complained of a severe migraine. Days of perusing business plans had taken its toll. Stacked high on the right side of my narrow desk amid pencil sharpeners and 2 staplers were documents of my latest investigation. Beside me on stools were a phone recorder, fax machine, and answering machine, each interconnected with each other in a dangerous cacophony of electrical wires around my ankles. Amidst these appurtenances of investigative journalism, I sat that day exhausted with the beginnings of a migraine. Meanwhile, then President Chandrika Kamaratungi had watched with dismay as Lasantha, my husband, and his newspaper unraveled her government. Chandrika soon nicknamed Lasantha the opposition party's poodle. Later into her presidency, she would have far more disparaging and belittling names for him. Lasantha wore these titles with pride. For him, such bitterness from the establishment was proof that his journalism was hitting its mark. At the newspaper office, Wijith, the chief sub-editor, Marwan, the features editor, and I nicknamed him the King. In his room, on his desk, was a call bell that Lasantha jangled furiously and often. The discordant sound prompted a peon to magically appear at his side. That afternoon, feeling as if tiny masons were breaking rocks inside my head, I went home, and in the evening, Lasantha visited. Here, he said, thrusting a small rectangular package in my face. Thick strips of cello tape, unevenly pasted, tethered the shimmery blue wrapping. The paper was crushed and the package badly wrapped. Thank you, I replied, taken aback. He smiled, nodded, and then turned and walked away. I thought at the time he was a man of few words. I was mistaken. So just quickly, this is well before they fell in love, or maybe they had already fallen in love, but they weren't a couple. I later found him to be loquacious, confident, and loud. I'll see you tomorrow, he said, and he went away. I tore open the blue wrapping. The cover of the box opened with a click as it pulled away reluctantly from its gold magnetic strip to reveal two objects uncommonly juxtaposed. Inside the sleek black case lay the writing instrument embedded in black satin. The gold cap band embossed with the brand name interrupted the smooth bulge of the black resin barrel. Ensconced next to the gold clip and sharing this luxurious setting was a disprin, a pill, torn from a card of pain-relieving tablets. The pill was encased in a jagged-edged square of familiar blue and white shiny foil covering. Light seeped through the milk-heavy leaves of the large frangipani tree in the corner of our front yard. The familiar white emblem inlaid on the tip of the pen cap shimmered as it caught the reddish evening sun. Lasantha's unwritten message: take the disprin, forget the headache, get back to writing. On 8 January 2009, Lasantha himself lay in my home in Bataramula Kotte, a place name. He was embedded in luxurious white satin in a dark mahogany case, his fingers clasped together at his navel, interrupting the smooth flow of the immaculate gray jacket. Near his feet lay a cross of red roses, each petal outlined in a blackish red. Someone had sprayed water over the blooms, speckling them with shimmery drops that threatened to fall. He hated the smell of roses. They reminded him of funerals. That's entitled, that little memoir fragment, Is It Bad Luck to Gift a Pen? So that's all I brought. Sonali's right now in Vermont, and she's in the States. She worked at the UN for a few years, and then now the bad guys went back into power, and she was forced to leave that job. But she's still here in America. And say thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for that reading. And I still fondly remember Sonali. I have a poster. I have a poster of her poem, Unbound and Unafraid, in my office. So.
Oh, well, that would have been something to read then.
Well, let's see if we have time. But I think coming up next is Erin.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to read an excerpt from the novel The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. And I think probably many of you may already be familiar with the novel. But if not, I'll just provide a basic summary. So this is often described as a dystopian novel where the reproduction is controlled by the state. So women's bodies and fertility is controlled by the state, and women are divided into legitimate and illegitimate based on their fertility. And the legitimate women are matched with commanders or the men of the ruling class to produce offspring for the commanders. So the main character is Offred, and it's told from her perspective. This book was banned in many high schools for sexual content and overtones, and was perceived as being anti-Christian, anti-Islamic. I'm going to read an excerpt from chapter 3. And in this passage, Offred is getting to know her family, the commander and the commander's wife. I go out by the back door into the garden, which is large and tidy. A lawn in the middle, a willow, weeping catkins. Around the edges, the flower borders in which the daffodils are now fading, and the tulips are opening their cups, spilling out color. The tulips are red, a darker crimson towards the stem, as if they have been cut and are beginning to heal there. This garden is the domain of the commander's wife. Looking out through my shatterproof window, I've seen her in it, her knees on a cushion, light blue veil thrown over her wide gardening hat, a basket at her side with shears in it, and pieces of string for tying the flowers into place. A guardian detailed to the commander does the heavy digging. The commander's wife directs, pointing with her stick. Many of the wives have such gardens. It's something for them to order and maintain and care for. I once had a garden. I can remember the smell of the turned earth, the plump shapes of bulbs held in the hands, fullness, the dry rustle of seeds through the fingers. Time could pass more swiftly that way. Sometimes the commander's wife has a chair brought out and just sits in it in her garden. From a distance, it looks like peace. She isn't here now, and I start to wonder where she is. I don't like to come upon the commander's wife unexpectedly. Perhaps she's sewing in the sitting room with her left foot on the footstool because of her arthritis, or knitting scarves for the angels at the front lines. I can hardly believe the angels have a need for such scarves. Anyway, the ones made by the commander's wife are too elaborate. She doesn't bother with the cross and star pattern used by many of the other wives is not a challenge. Fir trees march across the ends of her scarves, or eagles, or stiff humanoid figures, boy and girl, boy and girl. They aren't scarves for grown men, but for children. Sometimes I think these scarves aren't sent to the angels at all, but unraveled and turned back into balls of yarn to be knitted again in their turn. Maybe it's just something to keep the wives busy, to give them a sense of purpose. But I envy the commander's wife, her knitting. It's good to have small goals that can be easily attained. What does she envy me? She doesn't speak to me unless she can't avoid it. I am a reproach to her and a necessity. We stood face by face for the first time 5 weeks ago when I arrived at this posting. The guardian from the previous posting brought me to the front door. On the first days, we were permitted front doors, but after that, we're supposed to use the back. Things haven't settled down. It's too soon. Everyone is unsure about our exact status. After a while, it will be either all front doors or all back. Aunt Lydia said she was lobbying for the front. Yours is a position of honor, she said. The guardian rang the doorbell for me, but before there was time for someone to hear and walk quickly to answer, the door opened inward. She must have been waiting behind it. I was expecting a Martha, but it was her instead, her long powder blue robe unmistakable. So you're the new one, she said. She didn't step aside to let me in. She just stood there in the doorway, blocking the entrance. She wanted me to feel that I could not come into the house unless she said so. There is push and shove these days over such toeholds. Yes, I said. Leave it on the porch, she said to this guardian, who was carrying my bag. The bag was red vinyl and not large. There was another bag with a winter cloak and heavier dresses, but that would be coming later. The guardian set down the bag and saluted her. Then I could hear his footsteps behind me going back down the walk and the click of the front gate. And I felt as if a protective arm were being withdrawn. The threshold of a new house is a lonely place. She waited until the car started up and pulled away. I wasn't looking at her face, but at the part of her I could see with my head lowered, her blue waist thickened, her left hand on the ivory head of her cane, the large diamonds of her ring finger, which must have been fine, was still finely kept. the fingernail at the end of the knuckly finger filed to a gentle curving point. It was like an ironic smile on that finger, like something mocked her. "You might as well come in," she said. She turned her back on me and limped down the hall. "Shut the door behind you." I lifted my red bag aside as she no doubt intended, then closed the door. I didn't say anything to her. Aunt Lydia said it was best not to speak unless they asked you a direct question. "Try to think of it from their point of view," she said, her hands clasped and wrung together, her nervous, pleading smile. It isn't easy for them." "In here," said the commander's wife. When I went into the sitting room, she was already in her chair, her left foot on the footstool, with its petted point cushion, roses in a basket. Her knitting was on the floor beside the chair, the needles stuck through it. I stood in front of her, hands folded. "So," she said. She had a cigarette and she put it between her lips and gripped it. While there, she lit it. Her lips were thin, held that way with small vertical lines around them you used to see in advertisements for lip cosmetics. The lighter was ivory colored. The cigarettes must have come from the black market, I thought, and this gave me hope. Even now that there is no real money anymore, there's still a black market. There's always a black market. There's always something that can be exchanged. She then was a woman who might bend the rules, but what did I have to trade? I looked at the cigarette with longing. For me, like liquor and coffee, they are forbidden. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Erin, for that reading. I'm not familiar with that work, but it's very powerful in its own right. So Marella, you're up next.
Thank you very much. I'm going to read from a translation of a novel by Paola Masino, who's an Italian writer in the 1920s, 30s, and early 40s. The book was called Birth and Death of the Housewife. It was written between 1938 and 1939, and in her mind was meant to, she says, give a little shake to those dear customs, the slavery of women, and the common cliche of a good housewife. It was submitted in rough draft to the censors at the time. It was the fascist era. They considered defeatist and cynical, and because of the daring tone of the novel and the dark portrayal of marriage and family and motherhood especially, the fascist censorship demanded that Masino eliminate any reference that would suggest that it took place in Italy. Also, all the quotations from the Old Testament had to be eliminated, along with words like homeland and nation, which they felt were being contaminated by the overall disrespectful tone of the story. Masino complied because she had no choice, but when the book was ready for distribution, a bombing destroyed the printing office and all the copies were lost. And then after the war, Masino worked on the basis of the proofs that she still had, and the book was finally published in 1945. I'm going to read two short excerpts from it. One is from the beginning of the book with the description of the housewife. The housewife is always spelled with a capital H as a sort of sort of iconic figure. This is her as a child. At the market, she began to love food because to her it appeared as a new way to give and take death. She would stare at the concave stomachs of oxen hanging from iron hooks on the ceiling beams of the butcher shops. They oscillated slowly, deprived of their organs, which were hanging nearby, no longer tied to their natural receptacles, but to strange roots made of metal, and even that metal did not belong to that place, but had been torn out of the earth's body. The child drew the conclusion that she too must have something inside of her that the world needed, and that mankind would snatch out of her if she did not offer it willingly. The details of this robbery were still completely unknown to her, but at the very thought of it, she felt as if they were twisting and squeezing her bowels and was forced to walk in a grotesque manner, with her legs stiff and contracted. In those moments, she also experienced a sensation, a terrible sensation for her, of being immortal, of being unable, despite all her efforts, to be rid once and for all of the body they had put on her. So this was from the beginning. And the second excerpt is from close to the end, where the housewife, now old, she did get married, although unwillingly, and however, refused to have any children. And now she starts to travel on her own without a destination. Some of her fellow travelers tried to talk to her, but she could not pull away from herself and follow them along the ephemeral paths of conversation. She would look at them and see them performing their roles as husbands, fathers, brothers, and therefore as women's tyrants who reduce young girls into housewives, men who wear shirts, the buttons of which do not just hold two ends of fabric together, but also lock up their wives' minds forever. As for their wives, she found them even more repulsive, both the pretty and the ugly ones, girdled in elastic waistbands, their bellies and hips ready to burst, always sweaty and moody and unashamed of their animality, triumphant, or rather conceited, every one of them certain of being irreplaceable in her brutalizing task, the seductress and the victim, the dreamer and the schemer. And yet, out of gender solidarity, she would have wanted to save the females, to warn them, don't identify your fulfillment with a man. Have some decency, overcome your loneliness. Our only goal should be to go back and turn against Adam, he who gave us the first shelter and the first bed to defend for his sake. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that reading, Marella.
We have time for a poem by Sonali.
Yes, it's a very short one. So let me read that. It is Sonali Samarasinge, The Land My Father Gave Me, which was published in September of 2014. And this is the poem Unbowed and Unafraid. Dancing feverishly in a blur of mottled yellow, a tiny kite entangled in the branch, an electroformed earring dangling, a stylized doty of a devil dancer, leaping and dipping to some Luciferian ritual, prancing to the hypnotic drumbeat of the shaman, the other leaves frozen in time, like villagers mesmerized by the sorcery, and yet the devil dancer shimmers and shakes, he alone possessed, he alone bedeviled by the intoxicating wind. One tiny leaf boldly quivering, thrusting and parrying with the impudent breeze, while its siblings lie silent and still, clinging to the umbilical cord of the mother sapling. So Jonathan, I'm glad that you introduced Sonali earlier. And I would like to thank everybody for these really wonderful 2 hours that we were able to share. And Wayles, I will give you the last concluding thought, unless anybody else would like to chime in for concluding thoughts, that would be fine too. And
Yes, gratitude all the readers, and you can see something of the power of literature even when the authorities try to suppress it, or perhaps especially when authorities try to suppress it. But everyone, please go to Amnesty's website, amnestyusa.org, and find banned books. And if you have it in you, write 6 letters, one for each of the cases that are mentioned. They all need your attention. So thank you all in the name of Amnesty International Group 73 here in Ithaca, and let us keep up connections with you. And there are a couple of you who we don't have on the mailing list for the Amnesty Group, but I will add you to the list unless you really don't want to be added. And you will hear about our meetings, and you are very welcome to attend them. Yes, we send out the newsletter not quite a week before each meeting to remind people about the meetings. And we include a sample letter. And if you are lazy, you can just sign the letter and mail it. Or if you're more creative, you can write a shorter version and send that. So thank you to everybody. And we will be in touch again. And good night to everyone.
Good night. Bye.